Could Gen Z become AI's staunchest opponents? They might do. A series of viral moments have suggested that not all young Americans are thrilled about the possibility of an AI future. Today on the show, we speak to Rachel Janfaza, whose whole job is understanding what young people are thinking and planning. And it turns out that some of them may be hoping for a much more analog future than you might expect. Welcome to The Global Story on YouTube. Can you please, Rachel, tell us the story beat by beat of what's been happening at these commencement ceremonies?
Yeah, so essentially, here in the States, there have been a bunch of high-profile speakers who have been speaking at graduations. One of the most high-profile situations was at the University of Arizona when Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, was booed for the way that he spoke about AI to the group of graduates at the commencement there.
Last December, Time magazine selected its Person of the Year for 2025. And this time, it was the architects of artificial intelligence. Interesting.
I think he was taken aback. I mean, he is a man of massive success, and he's also done a ton of good for the world. And here he is being booed on the stage, speaking to a group that is meant to look up to him in many ways.
The conventional wisdom might be, certainly amongst the olds, that people who are just graduating from college and starting off in their lives might be into and on top of and across using AI in their lives and not hostile to it. But what did you feel about these videos when you saw them? Were you surprised?
Not at all. It was like the most classic Gen Z thing ever because Gen Z hates authority. They don't like being told how they're supposed to feel. And they are very skeptical of AI, despite the fact that they're using it every day. They really do feel like they're graduating into uncharted territory, and in many ways they are. And while every generation has had to go through its fair share of tumult and chaos, the fact that so much is unknown about what the future is going to look like at a time when these young adults are being asked to prepare for their future is creating a lot of tension.
Before we embark on what it is that might be driving all these feelings, I think it's important that we understand some of the terminology and ground rules. And the most important one of all is, what does it actually mean, Gen Z?
Yeah. So Gen Z is generation, anyone born between the years 1997, and technically there isn't really a cutoff on the back end yet, although it is said to be around 2012, 2013. And I've talked a lot about how within Gen Z, there are actually two Gen Zs. There's what I call Gen Z 1.0 and Gen Z 2.0, because I think that looking at the pandemic and also TikTok and the way that it has shaped other forms of technology too, and the way that everything is now short form content, young people who are part of Gen Z 1.0 and Gen Z 2.0, the older and younger halves of Gen Z, have had a really different adolescent experience based on how old they were at the time of these major world events and crises. Those who were still in high school at the time of the pandemic had never tasted that independence in a pre-COVID world. Whereas those in Gen Z 1.0 who had graduated high school, who maybe were in the working world or who had gone to college, they had had a little bit of taste of independence before having to be locked down because of the pandemic.
Okay, so there is a divide, but let's talk a little bit about how all of this is manifesting, particularly in education, which is how we got to this story, because it's young people graduating. What are you hearing from students that you're talking to about how AI is actually appearing in their education?
Yeah, so I want to roll back the clock a little bit to when ChatGPT first came out. And that was such a noteworthy moment because it was immediately a tool that everyone had access to. And at the time, classrooms, schools more broadly, educators in particular, were very resistant and thought that this would be something that would make it really easy to cheat. And that's true. But the genie's out of the bottle. And so what happened then was that very quickly there was this sort of tension between educators who were telling students not to use it, students who wanted to use it or were going to use it anyway. And then there was a cohort and sort of a school of thought of educators who realized quickly that this was here to stay, and that if AI was going to be a part of all facets of our society and culture, then it would be a disservice to students to not actually teach them how to use it and encourage them to use it to augment their potential rather than use it as a crutch. And so there's been a split even within educators of those who are bringing it into their classroom and their curriculum, and then others who are just still resistant to it writ large. And it creates a lot of asymmetry between sort of the education that students are getting today. When I ask now students, and I've been asking this question more and more frequently, can you describe your education pre and post AI? They're like, these are two totally different ball games. And that's both in terms of what they feel capable of, their confidence in their ability to do their own work. But I think also a lot of it is this now internal dialogue that they're having with themselves about when they should use AI and when they shouldn't, and also what they're losing when they cede their own skills to a chatbot. They don't want to feel reliant on technology to think for them, and at the same time, they're also being told that if they don't learn how to use AI, they're going to be left behind.
That idea that if we don't get across AI and what it can do and how it works, or will be left behind, was that something that was coming top down from schools and teachers initially, or from the kids themselves, or a bit of both?
I think it's actually a third party, which is the AI CEOs and executives who have really marketed these tools as such. They have said point blank that this is going to revolutionize our economy and our society, and if you don't know how to use it, there's not going to be a place for you in the future society. If that's how it's been messaged, of course they're going to be anxious about it, because they're still learning with an outdated playbook that they're being told in the media by the creators of these very technologies doesn't exist anymore. And at the same time, they feel like their education is, antiquated because it is not keeping up with the speed of this new technology.
Okay, so the story you're telling is of young people deeply concerned about what AI could do for their future job prospects. How is that actually playing out in the real world? What's happening to these young people in the job market?
The reality is that the entry-level job market looks really different than it did even just a few years ago. There's research showing that in 2025, just 30% of college graduates landed a job in the field that they hoped for, which was an 11-point drop from just 1 year earlier in 2024. So this is a very stark shift very quickly. And young people in our research have described applying to job portals where they feel like it's just going into a black hole and that no human being is actually reading the applications that they've sent in. And I think the bigger question here, and yes, it's related to the job aspect of this, but it's also about sort of the human and mental toll that this is taking, is a question about purpose. And this is a generation that is entering a world where they're being told that their human purpose and capacity and potential might not be necessary because a robot's going to do everything for them anyway. And the number one thing we hear young people say that they want in their future when they think about success is to feel fulfilled and to feel that they have a meaning and that they're serving some greater good. And they're not sure where to find that anymore.
There must be people within Gen Z 1.0 and 2.0 who see AI as an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to last spring, I was at a pre-professional school in Arkansas, and I've spoken with students from that school in particular. It's called Ignite. It's in Bentonville, Arkansas. I heard from a young man who was talking about how he had coded his own app, and he was so excited about this. And I could have a whole book about the number of young people who have told me about what they've done for themselves, the opportunities that they've created for themselves because they've coded with AI, vibe coded X, Y, or Z thing. Of course, when there's any point of disruption, there's going to be opportunity. But I think that what is overwhelmingly the narrative is that Gen Z's relationship to AI is very paradoxical, because while they're using it every day, and they're trying to learn how to master it, they're also feeling very anxious about it. I've written a bit about this, but I think a lot of our generation's relationship to AI is driven by FOMO, a fear of missing out, and less of an intrinsic desire to actually use it, because there's all this noise around them. Like we said, people who are saying you have to understand this or you're going to be left behind, or here's how I got ahead using AI. I coded this whole app. You should try it too. And yet at the same time, they have a lot of internal qualms or questions about it. And so there's just a lot of factors that go into when they decide to pick up their phone and ask one of these chatbots a question.
And are there young people who are actually refusing to use AI altogether, just won't touch it?
There are people who say that they don't use it. And I think there are people who say that they will use it, but not for schoolwork. They'll use it more for lifestyle, like figuring out a recipe to cook or a workout to do. There are other students who will tell me how they used it as a study guide or as a tutor, and have it ask them questions that they might not think about in order to prepare for a test. And then there are other people who are just totally using it outright altogether for everything and are not shy to share that.
And what would those people say to you about what they believe AI is doing for their lives for the better?
When I've asked about their relationship to the technology, they think it's a time saver and making them more efficient. And if part of this goes into sort of the FOMO piece of it, but one common story that I've heard from young people who are using it for almost everything will say, well, everyone else is too, and so if I don't, I'm the sucker. And I think that's a part of the social dynamic and the social pressure here too. And I'll go back to a conversation that I had, and it was with a young woman at the University of Arkansas, and she had shared that she was in a job internship interview, and it was a completely virtual exercise, and she did not use AI. She sent in the interview, and she was talking about it with her friends, and her friends were like, oh, so this was totally unregulated. You could have used AI for the whole thing. And she was like, I guess I could have. And in her mind, it was sort of this realization after the fact of, am I going to miss out on this opportunity because I didn't use the tool that could have increased my own potential when all of the other job applicants might have? And so that's kind of the dynamic that a lot of people are facing right now.
And one of the concerns that young people consistently cite about the future is their worry about climate change. What do people say about concerns over how AI could be playing a role in making climate change worse?
Yeah, this comes up all the time. Young people are quick to describe their fears around how much water it uses, and then they will say that they're still using it despite their concerns for the climate. And they hold these two truths at once, kind of.
It's funny you should mention that, because we were talking with our editor, James, in the lead up to recording with you, Rachel, about he taught me something called revealed preference, which is the difference between what you say you do and what you actually do. So the example that James gave, which I thought was fascinating, was back in, the dark ages when Netflix and other rental platforms like that would send you a physical DVD instead of being able to stream a film on demand online. You would pick your films according to what movies you thought your future self might want to watch, and therefore they tended to be more maybe highbrow and self-improving than they would be if you could just turn on your TV and click on the first thing that's there in front of you, and that apparently is called revealed preference, which I think is fascinating. So what is the revealed preference amongst Gen Z 1.0 and 2.0 when it comes to AI?
I think it's exactly that. The whole point of this whole conundrum is that they're saying that it makes them anxious, they're saying that it makes them angry, and yet they're still using it. And we are seeing, and I'm hearing it listed as a political issue, when I ask groups of young people what issues they feel that politicians here in the US aren't talking enough about, they are quick to say AI is one of those top issues. I guess when I'm thinking about the future of this movement and momentum, my question is, what will young people expect from their leaders, whether it be elected officials, whether it be educators, or whether it be the actual CEOs or executives at these companies?
There is one world leader, who has been talking out about this, Rachel. The Pope has published his encyclical, in which which is a letter to bishops around the world, in which he called on AI to be, quote, disarmed. Is that in line with what many young people might want?
He's one of the few people discussing AI and really calling for action here who doesn't have a personal interest in the race to profit from it. And I think that's quite important, given that young people are very skeptical of anyone who seeks to profit from the topic that they are talking about ad nauseum. And his take was really nuanced. He didn't reject AI outright. He instead called for a more human approach to it, and instead of labeling it as good or bad, he was honest about the possible trade-offs that might come as a result of the technology, and really called out the question of who should be held responsible. So I think that Gen Z has an unlikely hero in the Pope in this situation.
Rachel, I have two daughters. They are 8 and 11, and I'm sure you've been asked a similar question in the past by parents such as myself. I mean, I struggle sometimes slightly with what, if anything, I can advise them on what to study, what to aim for when all of this is coming down the pipeline at the speed that it is coming. What are young people telling you? Is there advice on this question?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm not a parent, you are, so you're definitely, better suited in this than I am. But what I will say I'm hearing from young people is that they are finding confidence by just experimenting and sort of honing their own passions and blocking out the noise of what everyone is telling them as much as they can, and really leaning into where they find happiness and community, and that's what's driving purpose. Our generation has been sort of on this ladder where we are constantly climbing a rung of a ladder that might not really exist anymore. And so I think as a result, it's well worth recalibrating our relationship to fulfillment and what brings fulfillment, and trying to find joy in relationships and things that are rooted in human-to-human connection. And we're seeing a resurgence in this, whether it be an analog revival, things like run clubs are becoming more popular, in-person dinner parties where everyone puts their phone in the center of the table, really just moments where you're in your community and with your friends. And I think a lot of that was lost during COVID. I've heard a lot of young people telling me that they're just trying to get outdoors more, spend more time in nature. These things sound a little bit cheesy and cliche, but I do think that there is merit to it.
I don't think it's cheesy and cliche at all, Rachel. I think it's heartening and encouraging. I think the problem I might encounter, though, is that I can't realistically advise my daughters to block out the advice that everyone is trying to give them. It's a bit of a catch-22, but I could try.
That's true. That's true.
That was Rachel Janfaza, founder of a consultancy called The Up and Up, and an expert on Gen Z. And that's it for today's episode. The Global Story is also a podcast. We're available every weekday. You can find us on bbc.com or wherever you listen. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Cheerio.